Welcome to Keys People of Influence. As you know, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm passionate about helping people to become their best self. And one of the things that I'm doing is interviewing people of significance, of influence, who I believe can help people and whose professions also complement mine. And one of the people I'm really proud to interview today is Dr. Rina Bajaj, who also is a part of the Key for Change team and today we're going to be talking about self-care tips during lockdown. Rina, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Keely.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me. So I'm a counselling psychologist by background. So I offer therapy, I offer clinical supervision, I also offer a range of training, and I work across the lifespan, so children and young people up until adults. And it's really about empowering people to make the changes that feel right for them. So as you know, I'm based at Key for Change and a couple of other places in London, but right now it's all virtual sessions or we're on lockdown.
How are you finding the shift to virtual sessions?
I think it's definitely a change. I personally prefer more face-to-face sessions. I think it feels safer, it feels more contained, but you can still do some really good work. It's also about checking in with where people are at now emotionally and how much you're able to go into depth. So I suppose the focus of what you work on might change during this time.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been finding as well is encouraging clients to use headphones as
Yeah,
well, just in case, thinking about their environment in terms of staying safe.
yeah.
So, in terms of, lockdown, the stress, the anxiety that can be impacting on people, what are some of the key tips that you'd like to encourage people to think about or maybe imbibe into their life?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to acknowledge that a range of emotions are going to be very natural at this point in time. And our emotions, our feelings can fluctuate not just on a day-by-day basis, but sometimes on an hour-by-hour basis. We've moved into this space of it feeling quite uncertain. There's been lots of reactive ways that people are responding to the change because we didn't really anticipate it on this scale. So I think the first thing is to really get to a point where you're kinder to yourself, and it's okay to not feel okay at times. So think about your support networks, who's around you, whether that's friends or family, or perhaps some national helplines if there's someone that you want to talk to, but also think about what self-care means for you. So self-care is going to be different for everyone. Yeah. And when we think of self-care, I like to think of it as activities or things that we do in order to help ourselves to feel calmer and more relaxed and more grounded. It doesn't mean that we won't need to ask for support at times, but I really want to sort of emphasize that social distancing doesn't have to mean social disconnection. And I think at this time, social connectedness is really important, and the connectedness with ourselves to be able to really monitor what's going on for us and help us to think about what we need is really important. In that way, we start to move from a more reactive place where we're blindly reacting instinctually because we feel kind of threatened or we're in survival mode, to a place where we're more reflective. And that's healthier in the long run.
So I like that you said about, social distancing doesn't mean social disconnection, how important it is. Some of the things I find with my clients is they're not always great at knowing what they need. That can be
Yeah.
quite difficult when you say, so what do you need? It's like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
So how can we
Yeah.
encourage people to start to think about what their needs are?
Yeah. Sure. So I think it's about checking in with how you feel, first of all. And if you can't do that emotionally, because sometimes as adults, we're not even that great at having a range of vocabulary or a range of understanding around how we feel. So check in with yourself physically. Are you tense or are you feeling relaxed? So your body will tell you before your mind and your emotions tell you sometimes. In that state of tension and relaxation, if you are feeling tense, think about what might help you feel more physically relaxed. And there's lots of ways that you can do this. What I would suggest is that people start to think about what helps them to feel calmer or more relaxed when they're in a calmer state. Because if you're in the height of feeling stressed and anxious, it's going to be hard to then think about what it is that you need. But if you start to create almost like a little toolkit of the things that you do that help you feel better, whether it's going for a walk, listening to some music, doing some artwork, reading a book, looking at positive things online, or reading inspirational quotes. It can be a whole range of things. It's going to be different for different people. So create a little toolkit, and then you have some strategies up your sleeve when you're in that state of feeling stressed or anxious, or you recognize there's a change in your body. That's where you sort of start. And then I think creating spaces to talk about how you're feeling, whether that's with, you know, your loved ones, or if you've got kids, you can start to model that. You don't always have to have all the answers, but sometimes it's about knowing that it doesn't feel so great today, and that's okay. Think about what support options are available both within your circle but also outside of your circle. So I'd say to people, like, start to get a toolkit together and have like a bag of strategies that you can then pick and choose from.
Yeah, one of the things I've spoken about is, if you have had a bad day, thinking about what was it that made it a bad day? What were
Yeah,
the factors that promoted you feeling bad? Because if you even, you know, like, having a toolkit is a great idea, but we can also elicit from bad situations what didn't help. One of the things I found was, one day I just didn't get dressed and I just kind of lazed around the house, and by 5 o'clock I just started to feel, and I was eating rubbish as well, which wasn't helpful. So that,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So our feelings, our thoughts, and our behaviors are all interlinked.
Mhm.
So actually, probably if you're not feeling great about yourself, the likelihood is that you're going to be having more negative feelings or negative thoughts. And then actually the actions that you choose might not be the most productive. But I think knowing that you can choose a different option, even if it's not that day, but it's another day, can be quite healthy. And I think also just thinking about, you know, monitoring your thoughts. Are they skewed more towards kind of critical thoughts and negative ways of thinking? Or is there something that you can do to bring in either more balanced thoughts or more positive thoughts? So I think challenges present us with an opportunity to identify our strengths. So even if your day hasn't gone quite to plan, or, you know, like you said, I didn't get dressed today and it didn't feel that good. Okay, but what did I learn? What have I learned throughout that process? What did I learn about myself? What did I do well? There'll be one thing that you can choose that you've done well that day. Even just recognizing and noticing that that's a pattern for me and I can change that. And how I start to like end my day now is to think about things that are positive or things that I'm grateful for. So even in a day where like things are constantly changing, or I've had a stressful day, or it doesn't feel the same, or I'm frustrated, or my moods have fluctuated, I try and find at least one thing that either went well or one thing that I'm grateful for, whether that's an internal attribute or something external. And in that way, you start to balance out these thoughts and recognize even in the midst of change, there's some positivity.
Superb, superb. One of the things that I've noted down that you said was about positive quotes, you know, online. And there is something about, I think, a responsibility that we have to ourselves to also think about what we are being subjected to online, because we can also decide. I know for some, leaving a WhatsApp group is very stressful, because they worry about how others might perceive them. But also,
Mm,
say Facebook or your Instagram, we can choose to mute, unfollow stories as well, if that doesn't do us justice. You know, so what would you say about taking
yeah,
responsibility for yourself in terms of social media and what we're, you know, what you're being exposed to?
yeah. So I think social media in itself isn't good or bad. It's how we use it, as you say. So I think just checking in with yourself, emotionally, how did you feel before you went online, and how did you feel afterwards? Do you feel better? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel calmer and relaxed, or are you tense? Are you anxious? Are you overly stressed? So yeah, as you say, you can mute things, you can unfollow. I think stick to sort of factual news, because I think also there's lots of things that goes around on social media, on WhatsApp, around an escalation in anxiety. And I think if your anxiety levels are rising, it's probably an indication that that might not be the most beneficial for you. So we've got to manage what's known as like cognitive overload. So much information being thrown at us all the time that our minds get full. So really we want to be more selective about about the information that we're taking in. So even simple things like taking a break from watching the news or going onto your social media timelines, think about, are you following people who inspire you, who are giving you tips and techniques to deal with things like anxiety? So just really kind of check in with yourself is what I would say, and take some regular breaks. So put your phone down, find other ways to connect with yourself, connect with the people around you. So while it's tempting to sort of be drawn into social media and the media in general, just monitor how you feel with that and how overloaded and anxious you feel.
Yeah, I think there definitely is something about, taking more responsibility about what we allow into our minds, into our awareness, because that can also feed those feelings of anxiety. And like you said, there's that, checking in with your body. That also gives us this wealth of information about where we might be at an emotional level.
Yeah. And I think, we want to have as much of a balanced perspective as possible. So if you're constantly watching things or hearing things that are negative, your mindset is going to kind of skew more towards that, and your perspective will skew more towards that, where it's easy to then start to think that everything is negative. So, going back to things like creating some positivity, thinking about gratitude, taking a moment just to breathe. What we're doing there is also creating a more balanced perspective. Yes, this isn't an ideal situation. It's not really a situation that most of us anticipated, but we can find our strengths and better ways of coping. So also think about, how would you like to be when you come out of lockdown? What would your mindset be like? How would you feel? What would you be doing? What are your goals? And that can give you something to keep working towards, because I almost see this like a mental marathon that we're running, but we don't quite know where the finish line is. So what do we want to feel like when we get to the finish line? Is there something productive you can be doing? What are the things that you've always wanted to do that you've never had time to do? So is it a time to sort of work on your own personal goals and work towards a version of you that you'd really like to be more authentically living?
You've mentioned the term gratitude quite a
Yeah.
few times. And what is it about gratitude that you think is really important?
For me, it creates a balance, and it creates an alternative perspective. And I don't know, I come from the position that the more you focus on the good, the more it can grow. And if we focus on the good, we're more likely to feel good, and we're more likely to think in more positive ways, which is then going to help us choose better behaviors. So yeah, that's just kind of a personal practice that's helped me to open up my perspective and actually live life more fully. Because I think we can be grateful in hindsight. So that's something that this whole virus epidemic has taught us, that actually we didn't really appreciate the things that we were grateful for before this happened. So I'm a very much like live in the moment, think about what's positive in the now, because we don't know whether it will be there tomorrow or not. So it's about appreciation for now.
You know what? Just as you said that, I'm drawing for this book, The Power of,
Okay, amazing.
which
Yeah.
I've been reading, and really, I mean, it's a guide to spiritual enlightenment, but I do think there are a raft of spiritual principles that are particularly helpful. Just like on my way driving here today, noticing all the blossom on the trees that before I didn't notice. I'm feeling, really grateful that nature is doing what it does. So there is that thing about gratitude that refocuses our attention away, on what is present and what is good in the here and now.
And yeah, because I think also anxiety a lot of the time is linked into the not knowing. It's linked into usually in the future we've got kind of negative associations with our past. But if we're in the now, we are in a state of knowing what's happening in the now. And that can be quite grounding. So even in terms of things like mindfulness, call it gratitude, call it whatever you like. It's about being present in this current moment. And I think even what you were doing in terms of noticing the blossoms and things around you, that's a mindful practice. And often when we think about mindfulness or meditation, we think about sitting down, we think about having 20 minutes to really get into a meditation. It doesn't have to be that. It can be just be noticing your surroundings. really looking at something that you use every day in depth, you know, valuing it, appreciating it, checking in with yourself. So it's also about expanding how we think of certain concepts and how we're more present. If we're more present and grounded, we're less likely to feel anxious because we're anchored in the now.
And that's what I love about reading this book, which is about, you know, so much anxiety can be caused from worrying about the past or fretting about the future. And if you can be right in the now, you know,
Yeah.
like you said, you know, noticing what is around us, that can help to redistribute our attention.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, in that way, we sort of have more control over our thoughts and our feelings and then what we do. So it's actually quite an empowering process to focus on the now.
Superb. So you've mentioned, you know, we know that, you know, some people will be living in situations that aren't ideal, and you mentioned some national helplines.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think we know that domestic abuse is on the rise at the current time, and how important it is for people to be able to reach out. We also know the Samaritans are also available.
Yeah.
I mean, I was also thinking about, are there any others that you might recommend for people to think about or check out?
Yeah, so there's Shout, which is a text line that you can shout, which you can utilize. Also, for young people, there's Childline, they're still open, and the Mix is a great one if you've got teenagers. So they have a crisis text line, they also have a phone line, and lots of information. If you are a parent looking for specific information around things like the coronavirus, how you can support your children, you can have a look at the Mentally Healthy Schools website, which has lots of collated resources. There's lots of information out there that you can tap into. And yeah, I think as adults as well, it's about how we start to model our stress, our anxiety, because children watch us more than they kind of hear us.
Most definitely. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you? What are your handles?
Sure. So you can have a look at my website, which is www.rinabajaj.com. So that's RINABAJAJ.com. I'm also on Instagram, which is at dr.rina.bajaj, and the same on Facebook. So what I'm trying to do is share lots of relevant tips and techniques around how you can manage anxiety, focus on the now, and yeah, all of my pages are dedicated to thinking about mental health and emotional well-being. So yeah, do check it out if it's of interest to you.
Rina, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your tips. I'm going to make a note of those because, you know, I think they are invaluable. And I think one thing is that we do have to take responsibility,
Yeah.
almost sometimes radical responsibility for our self-care at this now more than ever.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think there's always ways to do that. You know, some self-care is better than none at all. So think of it as a skill that you're developing. It'll get better, it'll get easier, it'll become more familiar over time, and then it'll become an ingrained part of your life. So the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
Definitely. Okay, well, I want to thank you for your time
Thank you very much, Keely.
and your words of encouragement. It's your girl Key signing out from Key's People of Influence. Remember to take care of yourself. All right, Rina, thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.